Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author and accomplished public speaker specializing in education and educational leadership. I am your co-host, Jeremy Johnson, organizational psychology consultant specializing in career coaching, training, and development. Meet us here each week to discuss topics in education and leadership and meet with some of the top education talent and thought partners from across the globe. So grab your latte, sit back, and enjoy a relaxed conversation that will leave you informed and encouraged.
Welcome to Lattes and Leaders. We have a very special guest with us today. I'm excited to share that Amy Dujon is with us in the house, online, wherever, somewhere in South Florida, I believe. So welcome
Yes.
to the show.
Brad, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm thrilled to spend some time together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I follow you on social media. I know some of the work you've done. I know some of the kind of extensive work you do and things like leadership, which I hope you'll share with us in a little bit. But
I
before we
will.
even get there, do you mind to share just a little bit about like your educational journey and how you got to where you are today?
I would love to. And in fact, I always tell people I never imagined myself here, right? This was not where I thought my career path would go when I started out, but I'm so fortunate and blessed that it is the journey that I went on. So I started my career as a teacher. I taught for 7, 8 years. I'm sorry, 8 years in Palm Beach County schools. I was a theater teacher, believe it or not. And so I was a musical theater major going into college, and then fell in love with being able to connect with students and some internships that I got to do. And so went into teaching, taught for several years, and then started to work my way up through the leadership ranks. Served as assistant principal, got to work as an area team leader, where we worked with the lowest performing schools in the district, and I got to do some instructional leadership there. Then principal, and then eventually moved up to the director of leadership development within the district, which was an honor to be able to do that, and work with our aspiring and sitting superintendents and our principals, and our aspiring and sitting assistant principals, which was a great joy of mine. But when I was principal, I had the opportunity to do some deep instructional work with somebody. Some of your folks might know Dr. Bob Marzano, and so working around his instructional framework. And so I was given the opportunity to leave the district and begin to work, to kind of share that work nationally. And that's where wrote my first book, The Gritty Truth of School Transformation, and did that work for a while. And then my previous superintendent was at DA. He had left the district and moved over here and reached out and said, "Hey, I think this might be a great fit for you. I could use some help, changing the way that we have our leaders coming together and making that time more meaningful." And so he brought me over to DA, and I've been here ever since. So working with our entire ed portfolio, our community EDU. And so now I get the honor of serving as the leader over not only our events, but our media platforms. Many of your listeners probably subscribe to district administration, our media, and our magazine. We also have our university business publication as well. And then on our event side, we have FETC, which is the Future of Education and Technology. We just finished that in Orlando. We had nearly 9,000 or around 9,000 people, maybe plus there. The numbers, I still don't have the final ones yet, but it's going to be awesome. 450 ed tech providers. It was an unbelievable week. And we also run smaller institutes. But our new launch this year is our Leadership Network for Women Conference, which I can't wait to talk about later. So a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah. What an incredible journey.
Yeah.
Along that way, was there any, and maybe not even leaders, but thinking back to teachers over the years, is there one or two people that kind of influenced you or maybe had a great influence on you and your kind of career path?
Absolutely. I think if along my journey, even as a teacher, I never when I went into the profession, would have seen myself moving into any type of leadership position. It was my very first principal, Patty Mandigo, who came into my portable one day, and she was like, "I see a little bit of me in you, and I'm going to take you under my wing, and I want you to start taking on a leadership position and start as I was a first year teacher going to my second year, made me department chair." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that," but got that opportunity, then started getting the bug of I kind of like having a bigger influence and increasing my sphere of influence on the way that we were doing things. And that really was the catapult to pushing me into getting my master's, starting to work into leadership, really understanding instruction and digging into that and how I could help to support teachers and other leaders. So, she was a kind of like the catapult, but I've had the honor and privilege of working with many dynamic leaders who, in one way, shape, or form, have all really imparted in me, different qualities. When I was a principal, my direct supervisor, who's a superintendent now in Indiana, I really appreciated the way that the trust that he showed in me. And so I took those pieces from him where he, gave me some parameters, but let me play in a sandbox and really have autonomy as a leader to be creative and to really push, my teachers and to develop something really cool that was happening and then bring other leaders along that journey. And so I think the leaders who've had the biggest impact on me have been ones who have identified and really seen where my talents lie and where my strengths were and really elevated me into rooms where I was able to use those talents and then also knew and recognized that there were areas where I needed coaching and did that in a really productive and loving but yet effective way. And so those two people in particular, there's many I could say. Even right now, I am inspired by many of the CEOs of tech companies that I've had the privilege of meeting who just remind me to always keep the lid off the box and stay innovative. The members of our organization are superintendents that come in and push me to continually push my thinking and to stay grounded. That's it. But ultimately, the thing that drives me the most is when I have the opportunity to be in classrooms with teachers and leaders and to really help them to drive the work that's happening there, but see those moments and stay grounded into why we do what we do, right? It's easy from where I sit to get quickly sucked up into policy or the way things are changing or funding or just kind of the minutia of those things that are my day to day. But continually being inspired by the work that I see in and out of classrooms is what keeps me motivated to keep getting better.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how long we've been in it, you always want to grow. We always want to be our best, and we never achieve that. So we should always be in that process of trying to achieve it. I agree with that so much. And it's interesting to hear so many people that I talked to share that there was someone that saw something in them. And I think that's so important. One of the things I share is that it's so important for leaders to be talent scouts and to be looking for those talents and strengths in people that they see to bring out. And it may be in different roles. It doesn't always have to track to be a principal and so forth. But we want everyone to bring their best and to use all of their talents and strengths so that they bring the most that they can, and it benefits everyone when we do that. So I love that, and I love when we have leaders that are looking for people to be able to do that. I think that mentoring is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, and sometimes I think it's a piece that kind of gets lost in the mix of everything because we all have our own roles and we are all stuck in the things that we have to do. And sometimes we forget to, we got to help bring the next generation along, the next group along, and mentoring them to help them be their best.
I could not agree more. I think it's really one of the number one jobs of leaders in schools and in districts, right, is to be building that pipeline, to have that bench of strong leaders that are coming up and to intentionally seek them out, to tap them on the shoulder, to, as you said, mentor them, but also to say their names and lift them up in rooms where they're not, right, and to continually um, encourage them that there are other there's other career pathways out there. And the districts that I see that doing that really well are other leaders that are doing that really well. They're not having some of the same issues that we see. Like their teacher pipeline is strong, their leadership pipeline is strong. But I do think we need a lot more of it. That's where, honestly, the leadership network for women really sprung out of that, and the need, that we need to be cultivating the next level of leaders. And how do we encourage some of our strong female leaders in our districts, right, to begin to see their pathway.
And that is absolutely one of the things I wanted you to share about. So let's just jump right into that because that really intrigues me. I've actually talked to a couple of people on here that have been in that or are a part of that and speak very glowingly. So if you want to take just a few minutes and share that, I love the concept. And I think you're so right to be able to give a voice to so many, especially females in the business and the leadership. I love the concept. So yeah, just share a little bit with us about that.
Yeah, it's a really special community that we've kind of formed there. It started as just kind of a pre event little gathering, and it grew into something that now is huge. And there are so many amazing. I would just like to say this first. There's so many amazing women's networks that are out there, whether they're other national, networks, or state level networks, district level networks. And so for me, it became a passion for creating a national hub where those networks could come together and connect and share the work that they're doing in their states, but also to really amplify the work that's happening. And it's not just about like getting, a girls trip, although, we say this one's for the girls. We're always looking for a few good men who are allies to get out there and help to support as we develop the next generation of female leaders. But what this network has become in our national event, which is going to be in September in Washington, D.C., is the opportunity for school superintendents, right, to look at, from where our tagline is, from the classroom to the boardroom, we're flourishing in every season. And so we really want them to tap a group of female leaders within their district to bring them to the conference. And our conference is really built upon 6 research-based tenets of female leadership development. And so we start with helping them to define and build. How do you build your own brand? How do you overcome self-talk and mastering the mental load that many females carry? It's not just what they're doing at work, but oftentimes, and there's many examples where it's not this way, but oftentimes, women are carrying a heavier mental load when it comes to what they're doing at home, right? They're constantly worrying about, like, if they have children, making the doctor's appointments, making sure everything's communicated, the after school care, the clubs, and all those things. And we rely on our partners to support that, but oftentimes that extra level of mental load falls on female leaders, in addition to the work that they're trying to do in their districts, which is amazing work. And it often it prevents them from raising their hand to go to that next level because they're not sure they can carry it. And so we're helping them to build the skills and tools and resources that they need in order to be able to raise their hand when they know they're ready to go that next level. We
It's
focus
easy to
on
talk yourself out of something. You're so right.
it is, because you think, well, I can't possibly take on more when I look at my full plate, right? If I raise my hand and I know I could do that job, and that's what I want to do, but we beat ourselves up and kind of talk ourselves out of those things. So that's one of the big pillars. As you mentioned before, mentorship is another one, and networking, and helping them to make the right connections, not just within their district, but even with other leaders across the country. We take a lot of time to tell our story, their leadership story, and everyone's had a different path. And we learn from each woman who tells that path, and it's easier for me to see maybe what I should do within the context of someone who's lived that journey before me. And so we really want to provide an opportunity, and that's one of our key pillars, is really building up their network and mentorships. It's also about strategic career planning, right? And how do you evaluate when it's the right time to do that? Harnessing family support is another one that's really important. So we have these very research-based 6 pillars. All of the content is based around those 6 pillars, and then it's that pipeline of leadership. Those are who we're targeting to be there. It's going to be a pretty magical time, and I'm really excited to get a bigger network growing from there.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And, the self talk's so important. One of my speaking topics is called Rewired for Success because our brains are wired for survival. And when you think about, like you said, females thinking of everything else, they have family, their children, and stuff that they tend to be most responsible for. Everything is wired for that survival instinct. And so you talk about like self talk. It's easy to have that negative self talk. It's easy to limit. It's easy to stay comfortable because those are things that, because how our brain is wired, it's safe. And
Right.
so that's why we tend to stick with that. It's not that people are lazy and don't want to try new things. We always talk about comfort. Comfort is about safety with our brain. And so we have
That's
to
right.
learn how to rewire. We have to change how we talk to ourselves and how we act, our first reactions and things like that are so important. And it is a process that we have to do to kind of what I call rewire our brain for success. And that self-talk is a big place that we have to start with. It's such a key to changing our whole mindset, really.
Yeah, and just kind of letting go or learning how to manage the imposter syndrome, right? Oftentimes,
That's part
female
of it.
leaders suffer that a little, at a higher rate, or they're burdened by that more than male leaders. They won't put their name in for a job, even though their male counterpart who might not have the same experience would do that. And so, really helping them to overcome those parts of our brain. I do it all the time. Sometimes I sit in meetings even now and I'm like, how did I get here and why do these people trust me? And I'm grateful for the opportunity, but if they only knew that I'm treading water right now, right? If they only knew that I am staying up late trying to make sure that I'm really clear on what I'm talking about. So I think that's the hardest part, but that's not unique to women. We've all experienced that at some time where we look around a room of leaders and say, how did I get here? And they don't, if they only knew. Right.
Right. I was going to say, yeah, I honestly think men are just as bad. We just tend not to ever verbalize it or try to show it. One of the things that I've researched over the last few years is teaching is called a high agreeableness. High agreeableness is or agreeableness is a personality trait. It's one of the big 5 personality traits. Well, teaching is probably the highest profession of people that tend to go into it that are high agreeable. And high agreeable people tend to be kind, empathetic, caring. If you think about it, even men and women that go into education tend to be that way. We're more even keel. We don't like conflict. We like harmony. We like to get along. But one of those big challenges to having that personality, and it's a personality trait, it's not something we choose, it's something that we are, but we can learn how to work with it. But one of the big pieces of that is imposter syndrome. And because of that, even when you do something great, you think, well, it was just luck or it was just happenstance. It wasn't really, what I did. Or part of that too is, you're always looking at everybody else. Oh, well, they're so much better. They do something so much better than I. I can never be there. And so it really is, yeah. I think men are just as bad, probably, but it is definitely one of those key factors that we really have to we all have it. And I think once we realize that and just learn, hey, you know what, everybody in the room probably is feeling that way or has felt that way at some time.
100%. I think about like the first, when I was first made principal, the first time I went into like our big district principal meeting, and all the principals and I was in a very large district, that all the principals were there, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to principals talk, and I'm like, I don't belong here. I'm not ready for this. I knew I was ready for it, but once I got into that room, I wasn't. And then once I started to find my voice and make connections, some of those people that I was admiring, those principals and great leaders that I had seen as I had grown up through leadership, were coming to me saying, "Oh wow, can you share this with me?" And I'm like, "What? Oh, okay. Maybe I do belong here, right?" And so I think that too also goes back to that whole mentorship and really when we see new leaders coming into our organizations, or as they're being promoted, really being intentional about tapping into them, reaching out, helping them to find their strengths and to support them as they're on that journey, into those positions, because they get lonely, right? And that's when the
Absolutely.
imposter syndrome can really start to take over.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are 100% right. When you think about what you've done with the leadership, is there a nugget, a gem, a diamond that's come out of that? Something, a philosophy, a tip that you could share with up and coming leaders that maybe someone shared with you, or it's just something that's evolved from that you think is important, a key piece?
That's a really great question, and there's been so many learnings in the last year. And I think the thing that's most important, that's really continued to, it strikes me every time run into one of our women leaders who has been at the event, or that we've engaged with in one of our online meetings, is the most important thing is to provide space, right? We need to provide safe spaces for our leaders to come together where they feel comfortable and supported, and they can really speak the truth of like their context, what's happening, and be able to share, like, listen, this is how I am interpreting that, because this is the background that I come from, right? Or this is why we hear these things differently. And it's the magic of that in the space of the leadership, that is probably the most intangible thing that I can't even describe, is the freedom that in the space that we've created for women to come and really feel like they can be themselves. They can talk about their struggles, but also celebrate and know that there's comparisons the thief of joy, and women are horrible at that, right? We're awful, at looking at other women and comparing ourselves, or judging. Sometimes we're more misogynistic against each other than a man to a woman, and that is real. And so really providing a space where that dissipates, right? And we can celebrate everybody uniquely, and we can give them a safe space to say, I'm really struggling here. Or whether it's at work or at home, and I don't know how to find that balance, and we're working with them to help to provide strategies for it. So I think for me the biggest nuggets have been, you know in the space that I am now, I'm my boss, right? And I have gone on a journey over the last 2 years where I'm so grateful for him. He's, I have a male boss, but I am able to say to him, because I'm a neurodivergent person, and I can say, listen, I just need you to know this is how my neurodivergent brain is hearing that, and this is why I'm receiving it that way. And so here's a better way to communicate that to me. And I'll be really honest, I don't know that I would have had the strength to, or even the courage to do that, had it not been for this women's network and hearing other really brave women who have done that in their journey and said, you know what, it's okay. Like, let people know who you are, be your authentic self, and be okay with that. And if you're in the right place, you'll flourish. And if it's not the right place, you'll know that it's time, right, to maybe start to seek a different environment. And so those are the things that have empowered me, and my job was to try to empower the women who were attending, but I got just as much out of it as those who are part of the network now.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to have, like you said, that space to do it, whether it's a group like that, or I like to tell, especially new leaders, whatever their role, assistant principal, principal, even at the district, find a mentor that's not your boss. We have
Yes.
mentoring set in place within the systems, which is important, but find someone else too that kind of like, with the leadership, it's people that can resonate with what you're going through and empathize with you. And it's someone to bounce ideas or problems. Sometimes it's venting that you have someone that is there that understands and can maybe help talk you through it. I just because like you said, when you're in certain roles, you feel so isolated and so
Mm.
all alone. I often say, the principal position is one of the loneliest because you're trying to, work that dynamic between the district and your staff. And so it's good to have someone that you can just go to and just say, look, this is what's going on. What do you think? Or, just to have to listen. I just think that that's so important. That's not necessarily in your chain of command.
I agree 100%. I always say you've got to have your circle, and part of that circle, you have to make sure are people who are also going to tell you the hard truths, right? You have to invite somebody in that, is going to be able to say, you know what, Amy, you need to, that one's on you, right? You know, and to be okay with that, that's part of it too, is building that circle that, yes, I can call you because you're not sitting here next to me. I don't feel intimidated. I don't feel like there's judgment. But also somebody who's going to maybe, turn around and give me the kick I need to say, okay, this is a me problem, not a them problem. And I need to look at it a different way.
Yeah, I love that, and that's so true too. I talk a lot about relationships, and when people, a lot of times when they hear that, they always just think warm and fuzzies, but that's not what relationship is really about. Like you said, sometimes it's about just being, honestly truthful to them, even if it's something they may not want to hear, because you do have that relationship and you do care about them enough to be honest and to share that. So
Yeah.
and that's so important to have, to help keep us on course, whether it's a teacher with a student or an administrator with a teacher or, higher up rank administrators. That's just such an important piece of that relationship.
I agree. It is. And it will empower you to have the courageous conversations that you need to when you go back, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I have one more question to get to you, but I did want
Good.
to thank you and for sharing that. I love what you're doing. I love how that you're empowering women and men all over the country and just having a huge impact on leadership in such a positive way. And I think that's so important because we need strong leadership now more than ever. And so I love what you're doing in the focus. But my last question's a hard one. It's with the lattes and leader concept. But what is your favorite hot beverage of choice?
Ooh, that is a killer question. I love that. So my go-to Starbucks order is a sugar-free vanilla latte. That's my favorite. That is like my staple. But if I'm feeling extra kind of saucy or tired, I will go for like a matcha latte with toffee nut syrup in it. That's my
Excellent.
go-to. Lots of whipped cream, caramel drizzle every time.
Perfect. Perfect. That's
What
awesome.
about you, Brad? What's your go-to?
Yeah, mine is a chai latte.
Okay.
It's like a spice
Yeah.
tea that they make into a latte. I don't drink them often, but that's my favorite. That's kind of the treat I get every once in a while.
Yeah.
And most mornings it's either coffee or the non-hot beverage for me that I live on and probably drink way too much of is energy drinks.
I'm a Coke Zero girl. I love that too. When I was a principal, my secretary would come in like 11 o'clock, and she would bring a Coke Zero. I'd be like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "It's time to transition from the coffee."
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking time to be with
Brad,
us today. I loved everything that you shared.
thank you for the invitation. Seriously, it was an honor. If I can connect you with any other leaders, or have any of the folks who are listening at one of our events, we would love it. I would love to meet everyone in person, you included.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much and have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guests, check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.